Oh my goodness, it's so lovely to be back on the podcast. I have Helen today. She's come to talk to us. Um, Helen is one of the critical members of Millspo. She is a Millspo. She is a military wife. She's a mum. She is a Millspo Inner Circle member and, of course, an RAF veteran. And we are going to have a lovely chat today, talking all things finance and her journey. So, Helen, first off, hello. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Could you please introduce yourself and a little bit about what you do and how you got there?
So I'm Helen Williamson. I am currently a financial planner. I am ex-RAF, as you mentioned. So I did 12 years in the Air Force and left in 2021 and did a career change academy, which retrained me to be a financial planner. So I now run my own business, partnered with St James's Place, and I try and help and empower people to manage their finances, reach their financial goals, and feel a lot more confident in how they sort of manage that part of their life.
And has finance been something that you've always done? Is that what you did in the Air Force?
So I was a personnel support officer in the Air Force. So I did have quite a lot of finance related jobs. I was an OC accounts in one tour, so I looked after the money for the station. And that included like the mess funds as well as different currencies and things that we gave out. I also worked in infrastructure where I had a budget for trying to things and maintain and try and make improvements, including some large scale projects. I wrote business cases for over £100 million worth of improvements at Lossiemouth. So related to money, but not personal finance. It's very different, kind of, I suppose, a very different element of finance when you're looking at people's personal finances as opposed to a more business corporate structure.
And you took that move because you left the Air Force and you wanted a career change. How was that for you? Was it an easy leap into that? Or did it take was a little bit of struggle?
Well, leaving in 2021, I went through resettlement during COVID, which probably wasn't the easiest transition, and as the world was transitioning to a more online kind of program. But yeah, it was. Um, I left because it was the right thing for us as a family and for me at the time. With my husband's job, I knew that there was only going to be so long I could stay in the same location as him. Well, now got two children. We only had one at the time. And yeah, we knew he was going to be more static and I'd have to move around. So it was partly that. It was kind of um, a, I suppose if I stayed, would that have made me any more employable? Which ultimately probably not. The with the skills that I would have gained from an extra few years, it wouldn't have changed much. So it was kind of let's just make the leap, leave now, and give it another go. But it wasn't. I wasn't leaving on a high as such. I didn't necessarily feel like I'd achieved everything I wanted to, but it was more about trying to achieve the right family balance and looking at moving on to the next stage of my life and making the most of that.
And your military background, what difference does that make to what you do now? So if you'd never had that experience, do you think that, well, obviously you wouldn't be where you are now because you live in Scotland and that's probably quite a different place from where you started out. But do you think your military background has been a bonus to what you're doing now with your financial planning?
Absolutely. I mean, the academy that I went through is designed for people that were moving into a second career. So it wasn't for people leaving university. It wasn't a graduate program. Everyone had done something completely different. We had an ex-professional footballer, a couple of teachers. Some people had worked in financial type roles, but a complete variety of different backgrounds that people came from. And I think for what I do, that's probably more important. Like if you just work in finance, you understand maybe the the technical side possibly a bit better than I do. But the most important part of what I do is relating to people and understanding their lives and being able to put a context kind of on that. And my military background helps me work with a lot of military families, as well as I'd also work with a lot of self-employed people, which I am now too. So I'm able to relate much better to their personal circumstances. And I think it's a really important part of financial planning. I think um, it's being like recognized more in the industry because there is a massive lack of financial planners in the country. They call it the advice gap. So the lack of financial planners to the sort of people who could do with assistance from a financial planner, financial advisor, and having people from a variety of backgrounds is so important when you can relate to what your clients' lives are like, and put that perspective on.
And we did that. So me and my husband, we had a chat with you at the start of the year. Thank goodness. We decided that 2024 was the year that we started to adult. We're still pretending, but we're going to get there. And we had a chat with you because we have our son now and we're getting older and life is changing and we need to start thinking sensibly. And it was brilliant because you are ex-Air Force and you can talk in code for my wonderful husband who also talks in code, but you can flip it on its head and talk to me in a way that I understand it, which is hard with financial stuff and finances. When you start digging into it and thinking about it, it could frighten you, but also it's so overwhelming. So we had a chat and it was very good. It was about retirement and looking forward. But for anybody who hasn't a clue where to get started, doesn't really know why financial independence or financial support or planning is important, what would you say to them?
Or don't be afraid to ask for help for a start. It's not necessarily as expensive as some people think. An initial chat is often most financial planners will offer an initial chat at no charge. So don't be afraid to reach out, even if you're not sure if it's for you. But I suppose if you're not ready to reach out, then the first step is looking at where you are, kind of um, having I suppose, an overview of your current financial position, what you're spending money on. Are you happy with what you're spending money on? And kind of, are you spending it in ways that align with your goals? Whether that's you're saving for a house or you're focused on family for now and you're spending a lot on childcare. I kind of definitely appreciate that, having had a baby last year. And yeah, there's different challenges and different goals that everybody has. So knowing where you are is one of the key first steps. And then I suppose looking at where you want to be. And said you can obviously do that on your own. It's just you can have somebody to help guide you through it. But if you know where you want to be, then you can just look at, do you feel like what you've got in place and what you're doing now is going to help get you there? Do you need to make changes or anything? I mean, unfortunately, financial education in this country is notoriously poor, so it is very hard for people to necessarily understand what they can do, and what the best options are for them. It's also so complicated. There was obviously a budget fairly recently, and there was a few changes in that, which it said you like, do people want to and have the capacity to understand that along with all of the other options that they have? So as I said, definitely don't be afraid to ask, but understanding where you are now and understanding where you want to get to, and then just trying to make some simple steps, whether that's saving into a pension. If you know you want a comfortable retirement, make savings into a pension. Or whether that's various other types of investments and options available to you. Everybody's going to be a bit different, but definitely don't be afraid to ask if you're not sure.
And it was the future bit that you touched on there that I think I took away from our chats with my husband earlier in the year, that is that we never think about. I've never thought about it. I have my business and my child, and that's what I'm focused on. We focus so much on the now that we never look towards the future. And you said to us, what does your retirement look like? And I'm like, oh, I haven't got, I barely know what I'm doing tomorrow, let alone my retirement. But talking to you about that and realizing how important setting myself up now for the future is going to be, whether my husband is still here or not. We all rely on the military pension, but the reality could be very different. We should never rely on other people's money, is kind of what I'm saying about that. But we never look to the future, and self-employed people very rarely think about pensions and how important that is. To become more financially independent and thinking about the sustainability of it in the long run, how important do you think it is for people that are self-employed, have their own business? Maybe they have a military partner who they have to rely on to look after them because that's the reality that a lot of us have. At what point do we need to start thinking, right, we need to think long term, this is more important? And how important is financial security for military partners?
I mean, it's not just important for military partners, it's important for the military person themselves. Because like if the military partner is not financially secure and if there's I suppose like if anything happens to them, then there's always going to be an impact on the serving person. If you have children, can you continue in your job in the military if your partner's kind of what say either unwell or not around anymore? So it has an impact, I suppose, on both sides. But there is obviously like there's gender pay gaps and all sorts of things talked about a lot in the press and people will be aware of. And I think it's even sort of more of an issue in theory for people like military spouses because a lot of people do have to give up their careers to then follow their partners around, and they're either not earning as much as they potentially could have done if they were more stable, or they may have had to give up work kind of completely. And if you're employed, you get a percentage of your salary goes into a pension, depending on actually the generosity of your employer. They are obligated to do a sort of a minimum level, but some will be more generous and do more. So if you earn more, you automatically get larger contributions into that pension. If you're not earning as much because you've gone part-time to manage around their schedule, if you are said, or if you just haven't taken a promotion or haven't been able to get promoted because you're moving around regularly, it will have that knock-on effect. If you're self-employed, it's often the last thing that people think about, putting a pension in place. So I suppose urge people to just consider getting some advice as to when is an appropriate time. It can be a good tax saving tool too. But yeah, it's definitely something I try and say to people, don't put off. You can pay into a pension if you're not working. You don't have to be working to pay into a pension. You can make contributions and get government top-ups on that. Even if they said you can pay in less per month than if you were working, but you still have an allowance that you can pay in even not working. So if your budget allows, then making sure you're putting some sort of provision in place for retirement for both spouses is definitely a good way to do it. It's also there's also the other side to look at from when you're in retirement. If all of your wealth is just with one person, they're going to pay a lot more tax on it than if you're split between two people and you've got two sets of tax allowances to use. So yeah, it's worth putting something in place sooner rather than later. If nothing else, it also just becomes that habit and it becomes that automatic thing to do something. And you can always make improvements on it in the future, but starting something's great. And for people who are maybe not earning as much for a period of time, it's particularly important to look at.
Yeah, just to look at it. That's the thing I think that we are talking about. Just it's like all those things that we have to do, all the admin that we have to do. We always put it off because we don't think it's important. And before we know it, we'll be at retirement age and have done nothing. So maybe just looking at it, considering it, and then doing something about it. It is overwhelming, but it is manageable and it is doable. We just need to take that first step.
And there's no right or wrong ways to spend your money. It's just about personal choice, and being more informed about the options helps you make like it makes it easier to then prioritize what's important to you now, what's important to you in the future. And as I said, everybody is going to be different. Everyone's going to have different focuses for different periods of their life. And just sort of like I said, that it's important to not feel guilty about what you're spending money on now as well, and not feel like or feel bad for not having done anything yet. Um, that a lot of people I meet with, I've met with a number of women in their 40s and 50s who are initially panicking about not having anything in place, but they're making a step then. Like it's better to do it as soon as you are ready to, rather than just putting it off for the future. And if you're in your 40s or 50s, there's still a lot of positive steps you can make to then make that reach your financial goals and your life goals then for the future.
So let's wind it back to you, talking about life goals and future goals and things. Um, Talking about, we don't talk about serving people on this podcast because, quite frankly, they get enough airtime and they're completely fine. They're wonderful in their own ways, but there's an awful lot of podcasts about military life. This is about the other side. This is about those in the shadows. So, talking about you and your career and your husband and his career, what effect do you think the fact that you were dual serving and the fact that your husband was also in the Air Force it has had on your career?
Um, it made it harder. When you're, I suppose, single, when you don't have any as much ties, you're a lot more flexible about where you go, and your career can maybe be your primary focus. When you have a partner and you're trying to, I suppose, like tie into the same location, then you may look at maybe not as wide a remit of jobs. I was definitely well, obviously trying to work in a similar area, certainly after we had our daughter. But and we also, I suppose, had to try and time away. I was deployed to the Falklands for 6 months when my daughter was 2.5. And I mean, thankfully, we managed to make it work at that time because my husband was in a ground job as he's air crew. His hours are irregular. Obviously, you don't live close to family. He can help with childcare. So, me being away while he was in a flying job wouldn't have worked. And obviously, I don't know how we would have managed it if that was the position, but I suppose thankfully he wasn't. And that was certainly a concern when I left, well, when I was looking at leaving, that now he is flying again. Um, like if I'd been deployed, what would we have done with our family? As you mentioned, we live in North Scotland, about 600 miles away from our family, so couldn't be much further away from where I grew up near Southampton. But yeah, it's there were and I did find a little bias from some bosses that felt like, because I don't know if it was more that he was aircrew, not necessarily because I was the woman and he was the man. There could have been a bit of that. It's hard to say, but that saw me as the primary caregiver, and therefore how committed was I to promoting and into that long-term career. Unfortunately, I do believe those biases still exist. Not certainly not with everybody. I worked with some amazing people who had family priorities and the were like great. And certainly, like the last job I was in was amazing for that work-life balance. But I was in others as well where it was hard, and it was definitely juggling priorities, and there are definitely people who have a very antiquated view of dual serving couples, in my
And
opinion.
yeah, no, I can see that completely. Because we were talking before we started recording about um how do they do it? I mean, we can barely do it with one person serving with a new child, let alone the two of us serving. It sounds like a huge juggle. Um, but yeah, throwing children into the mix and the moves and now you have your business. So you now have your business, you have your children, you have a real home, you have your forever home. I'm very jealous. I always tell people how jealous I am when they have a real home because I'm still in my Magnolia Marry quarter, but we will get over that. You have a lot of things to juggle, a lot of balls in the air. How are you doing it with the children and the business and the husband in the Air Force? Did you do shared paternity, maternity leave? Is that what happened?
Yes, so obviously when you're self-employed, you get very minimal provision. So that is one massive benefit of the military, with the completely shared parental leave. My husband took 6 months off full paid. with full pay. It wasn't quite full time. He did sort of balance it a bit with sort of going in and doing some work during that period, completely by his own choice. He wanted to sort of keep in touch, and with me running a business, I could be flexible around that. But yeah, I had our little boys, actually one tomorrow. So had a baby a year ago. Took a few months, we took a step back for a few months, but being able to not have to completely pause it was a really good benefit of having a my spouse with such good parental benefits. So definitely, it's not widely known. Like there were a lot of people he worked with that didn't know that policy existed when he applied for it. So we're really lucky, I suppose, that we did have that awareness. And it's definitely worth people if said if you are self-employed and you have a baby, if your spouse is willing to take that time off work, it's like I said, it's a great benefit if it works, obviously, for your family, and hopefully more and more people do it because it will only even up the views of everybody about, I suppose, who does the childcare, and also, I suppose, not necessarily looking on a parental period as being a step back, or parental leave period being a step back, because maternity can be looked at when you've had such a long break. It again, I know certainly know that it's not the case in all areas, but having that career break from your diary can be looked at negatively. And the more and more people that do it from mums and dads, the better that is, I believe.
So much better. And so few people know. You're right. So I was talking to somebody the other day that lives on our street who didn't know about it. He was convinced that he would just not get paid for the time that he took off. So he took his 2 weeks and then he was back to work straight away, convinced that there would be no benefit. So a lot needs to be done, but it is such a brilliant thing. So you have the children and the business and the husband who's done the Air Force. Who picks up the slack now? How does your family work? I think maybe I'm asking for myself because I don't know how to do it. But I think it's just important for everybody that is listening to know that you can run a business and have a family and have somebody in the military. It's hard work. It's a lot of juggling. But how do you do it? What are the good bits that you would like to pass on?
I mean, we're definitely learning still, and we're definitely making improvements as we go. But we have a childminder 3 days a week. So my daughter is in school. So she does after school club on those days to give me kind of 3 full days of being able to focus on work. But because of the nature of what I do, because I go out and meet people, evenings and weekends are often more convenient for some people. I obviously try and keep as much as I can to my, I suppose, working days, my priority days. Um, but my work isn't just sort of 9 till 5, and that some of that is, I suppose, the good side of being self-employed and having some flexibility on your schedule. And it is difficult sometimes with like my husband having an irregular schedule. I have to try and book in evening. If I want to do something in an evening, I have to book it in, or I have to wait until he's got his schedule and then try and arrange appointments around it. But thankfully, the community up here, and I mean, a lot of my clients have a military background anyway, but the community is very military aware in our area. So it's not too much of an issue if I do have to rearrange something at short notice. And to be honest, a lot of clients have had to do that too because their RAF schedule or other schedule has changed. So yeah, it's about, I suppose, not thinking of it as a 9 till 5. I have 3 days I try and focus. I do some work around it. I do try and do some work in nap times and things, which I probably should take a bit more of that time for myself. And I do have work that I catch up on in evenings at times. I would like to get the balance better, certainly. It is said it's very much a work in progress. But that's, I suppose, where we're starting for now, and trying to balance it from there. But thankfully, he's on holiday this week, so it's giving me a little bit more time coming up to the end of the tax year to focus on getting some last bits of work through for some people.
And we live by that. We live by our calendars as well. We do a lot of scheduling and trade-offs. But that's the joy of the military, I think, because they are known to disappear for weeks on end. If you have something that you want to go to or something you need to do, in my marriage, I've got a lot of credit, so I can cash that in at any moment. You were a dual serving couple, you now have your own business. Your husband's employer, your previous employer, the MOD, if they were sat listening to this podcast or they were sat in the room with us, what would you say to them to make life easier for you as you are as a spouse now, as a veteran now, or as a dual serving couple? Is there anything that you think could be made easier or better, or is there anything particular they're doing that's really good that they should be focusing on and shouting about?
I mean, I certainly think they should be shouting more about the parental leave, because that's a great kind of policy that does even things up a bit and isn't well enough known. I um, I know they're trying to get more flexibility in place. They've got flexible working schemes. Um, I think it's quite hard in practice for a lot of people to actually kind of follow them. And it not have an impact on their career. I think the biggest thing is trying to change the mindset across all ranks. There are definitely people who um are in a bit more of a traditional mindset. Um, so I think they need to regularly listen to the opinions of people from more backgrounds, from more situations, and um not look at it as the linear sort of old model that worked kind of the policies don't align with that anymore, as such. Like either the pay and the pensions and the benefits are all changing, that mean it's more important for a family to have or they can't live to the older models anymore, and many don't want to. Some do, and it works, but I would just say, I said, listen a little bit more to people from, I suppose, from all different places. Ask for those opinions more. Ask what works for people in different places. And yeah, I suppose like it's a really like it's a very hard question to think about. But yeah, I think I know if I was still in quarters and if I was moving around the country, it would be hard to do what I'm doing. I'm quite lucky that my husband is quite static with the job he does. He does go away normally for shorter periods, but he doesn't get deployed as regularly as a lot of people I know, and he doesn't get posted around the country as much as a lot of people. So um, that it could also be maybe offering more different career options for people to like some people want to move around and experience different places. Some people might want to be more static, and not look at a newer model as to a disadvantage, which it feels like if people make those newer choices, if they go flexible working, if they take extra time off work for family, it's still looked down upon that you're not career focused. I think people can be career focused and family focused, and just understanding that and not making assumptions would be great.
That's so brilliant and so true because the military is its own beast and it has its traditions and it's operational. That's what they do. They are an armed forces. They're operational, but they're a modern military and they should be innovative and looking forward. And the world is changing, and we're a team. We're all a team. It's serving people and those that stay at home and pick up all the pieces. And such few things can help us to make it easier to run our own business, to have our children, to live our lives the way we want to, and policies are in place. And you're so right. Just to listen to a few more views and be more adaptable and be more flexible. They can do this. It's the modern military. We could do this. Helen, it's been
I
fab
think
talking
the
to you.
military, oh, sorry, I was just going to say, I think the military is almost better on operations in terms of adaptability and flexibility at home. And it feels like policies take so long to get put in place, but suddenly when they go overseas, they can suddenly adapt very easily. So maybe take some of that adaptability and focus that they can do so easily and so well overseas and bring it home.
Yeah, because they're good at it. They're good at being innovative, so they can do it at home. You're so right. Before we finish, is there anything else you would like to say?
Um, I don't think so. As I said, I just want people to maybe just take a little bit more control and empowerment on their finances. I want people to feel more empowered, and I try and give us some financial education out a little bit on kind of on social media and on different platforms. And I know there's lots of other people who do as well. So I suppose just as I said, I'd like particularly women to take more control and feel more empowered and confident with their finances, not put it to one side. Said really feel confident and feel empowered and feel good looking towards the future at the way it's working and what they can achieve.
Brilliant. That is the best place to finish this. I will share where everybody can find you on the podcast and on our socials. Helen, you've been ace. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for our talk at the beginning of the year that sorted out my life. I'm going to have the best retirement ever, I'm sure. Thank you so much for being a podcast guest as well.
Thank you very much for having me. It's great. And as I said, I also encourage everybody to join Millspo, and the inner circle is fantastic. If you're setting up a business, there's some really great kind of pieces of work that Jess has put together that you can work through to not just start it, but also to grow and establish yourself. It's a brilliant resource.
It really is. We love the inner circle. So yeah, thank you so much, Helen.